Hey, what's up? It's Tati and I'm back with another review. This time is Dark Side of the Ring, Season 1, Episode 5, The Mysterious Death of Gino Hernandez. Now, Gino was one of those guys who could have been absolutely huge in the business. Unfortunately, he was another wrestler who lived his gimmick on the outside of the ring, and I do believe that is part of the reason why he's no longer with us, and that contributed to his untimely death at a really young age. Now, he reminds me of like Rick Martel mixed with Ric Flair type of vibes, especially when he's on the mic, but he was actually really great in the ring as well. He had been training throughout his young life with his stepfather, Luis Hernandez, who taught him how to wrestle up until he was 12 years old, and he went pro, I believe, when he was 17. And he, out of like respect for his stepfather who showed him how to wrestle, he decided to take on his last name as part of his character. And he did a lot of things at a young age, especially getting married at 18 years old, having children, and getting divorced early, also getting married again back with his ex-wife, and even divorcing her like about a year later. However, he obviously got mixed into things that I feel like definitely were drugs, alcohol, that whole party life when it comes to being a wrestler, especially in the late 70s and 80s. Drugs was everywhere. You can easily get your hands on that. But it wasn't just him doing the drugs like everyone else. He was also selling as well. And I do think that ended up catching on to him later on in life. Gino spent most of his career wrestling for World Class Championship Wrestling, where he was partners with Chris Adams. They formed the Dynamic Duo tag team, and they had a famous match at the Cotton Bowl versus the Von Erichs. Loser gets their head shaves, and obviously the Dynamic Duo ended up losing that match. So Chris Adams is somebody that I do think that Dark Side of the Ring would do an episode on. He also was battling his own demons as well, getting into drugs and alcohol and whatnot. So I could definitely see him being a topic in the upcoming episode. However, this episode doesn't really speak much of them together outside the ring. Now, his family didn't know that there was anything going on, as far as maybe they knew he was doing drugs, but they didn't know that he was getting into the wrong crowd. Now, David Manning, he's featured in a lot of episodes, so he's had a lot of experiences with a lot of these topics. And one time he went out with Gino in Vegas, and he said it was the first time he realized that Gino was getting into something far more worse than just doing drugs. They went to a hotel, and there was a top floor suite. When they got there, it was just nothing but drugs and alcohol, girls, and people who just looked like you did not want to mess with. And that's when he realized that Gino was hanging out with this crowd. Unlike everyone else who was getting drugs from these types of people, they just got their supply and left. Gino was with them for days on end and doing God knows what. And David started feeling like something was, wrong, but didn't know what was going on until closer to his death. Now, even his ex-wife, like, they got married twice, and she said that she always had a feeling that he was getting into the wrong crowd, and she feared for her safety and her family's safety, yet ended up getting back with him. Did she know the extent of the people that he was with? Probably not. Probably until after he had passed away is when people started realizing, what type of people he was getting himself into. But he was definitely doing something that caused his death. So let's get more into what exactly led up to his death and what made it so mysterious. So now we're at the point of the episode where everyone is stating when was the last time they heard or saw of Gino. His mom stated that it was Super Bowl 86. So I looked it up, and that was January 26th. So she said that he came to the house and he had something in his hand, maybe a box in his hand, and he came in looking worried and paranoid. He just walked on in, and by the time he was leaving, he no longer had whatever that was in his hands anymore. And she thought that maybe he hid something in the house. She said she never found out what that was. They didn't really have any time to talk. He was such in a rush, so he was basically in and out. So that was January 26th, the last time she saw him. I don't think she mentioned about hearing from him like in a phone call after that either. So then we have David Manning, who saw him around that time. Didn't specify exactly what date that was, but he came over to David to ask him for a gun. So he said he was in his car, he started driving, and soon after he realized that somebody had been sitting in his back seat. So he's driving, and whomever that is still sitting there, and he's worried. He's worried that maybe he's going to kill him, stab him, whatever. So he said to David that he kept driving, but kept an eye through the rearview mirror to see what that person was going to do. And then at some point he was freaking out and he slammed on the brakes, and rather than the guy doing anything to Gino, he just ran out the car and left. And then that's when Gino went to David to ask him for a gun. David said he didn't have anything, and that is also an important information as well, because he's actually found dead with a gun beside him. So he had gotten that gun maybe somewhat right after that. And also we have his manager, not his manager, okay, so it was another wrestling manager. Her name is Jenny, whatever it was. Her, every time she talked about him, I kind of get a vibe that maybe they had something going on. She said that Gino came over to show her that he had a white box and there was a pie in it, and if she wanted to have some, she can come over his house to have some. And that just gave me some type of vibe like something going on with them. Like, that's kind of, she never said anything, but that was my take on every time she talked about Gino. Like, something was going on between them. She was like always at his apartment, always going to parties with them. You're a manager, like, what are you doing with him all the time, especially alone? So I just felt like maybe they had some type of affair, or probably, you know, doing whatever they were doing. So she said that was the last time she saw him about the pie. So she decided she was going to go the next day to his apartment to spend time with him. And when she went there, she saw his car parked outside the apartment, and she's like, the way it was parked, rather than the wheels just being straight like this, like parallel parked, it looked like he parked in a rush because the wheels were like off to the side like this. So now she's wondering, did something happen? Like, why did he park this way? So she said she went to go look through the window, and she saw the white box that had the pie on the table. She didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so she knocked on the door, but no one ever came to the door, and she left it as that. So now it is February 5th. Okay, and his mom gets a phone call from Gino's manager. Forgot his name. He calls and he goes, have you seen Gino? He had missed 2 events back to back, and maybe the first event people weren't all too worried, but the second one, people were doubting, why would he miss this? You know, he wouldn't miss this. Something must have happened. So he calls on February 5th. Now that's an important date because February 5th is Gino's mom's birthday. And she's like, oh, he's gonna call me. It's my birthday. He calls me all the time. He hasn't called yet, but when he calls, I'm gonna let him know to give you a call. And there were no calls at all from Gino. So she became worried as well. And then we have David Manning, who was concerned about him missing that second event, send a referee to the house to see what was going on. The ref went to the house, and no one came to the door every time he knocked on the door, and he decided that he was going to jump over this wall to get to the back side of the apartment where the bedroom was. And when he looked through that window, he can see Gino's legs on the ground, on the opposite side of the bed. So you couldn't see his full body, only his feet sticking out. And that's when he realized that something was wrong. Shortly after the referee found his body in the apartment, the police came and to run a investigation. Now, I went to look online to see exactly what day the body was found, and everywhere I looked said it was February 4th, but that couldn't be true because his mom's birthday was on the 5th. So I dug a little deeper, and there was like a news story from February 5th where they showed them taking his body outside of the apartment. So it had to have been on her birthday that they found the body. Don't believe everything you read online, because that obviously could not have been correct. So now they found his body. There was a gun at the scene. However, there was no indication that the gun had went off. Everybody knew that Gino did drugs, but there were no drugs at the scene, and that was very strange because the autopsy did say that there was a possible like cocaine overdose or whatnot. So it wasn't easy to tell what was going on, especially because his body was so decomposed. They said his body must have been there for 4 to 5 days. So he probably died somewhere around maybe January 31st through the 3rd of February, and then he was found on the 5th of February. Now, what made this very interesting was that while his family was grieving, they just found out about the death or whatnot, a guy comes over to Gino's mom's house. Now, Gino's mom seen this guy before, so she didn't really think anything of it. She let him in thinking that he's coming in to give his condolences. He did come in and do that, but he also said, you know, Gino owed me a lot of fucking money, but I'm gonna pay for his funeral. And what made that so much more memorable was the tone of voice that he had when he said that. So she just couldn't believe that he came to the house and with a threatening tone of voice basically said, I'm going to pay for your son's funeral, even though he owed me a lot of money. So surprisingly, she let them pay for the funeral. Now, the funeral was a hot ass mess. You had wrestlers there, you had family there, and then you had a squad of gangsters and drug dealers there. They basically took over the funeral, giving eulogies, telling stories about when Gino and them got into their little, you know, troubles and things like that. Basically saying things that you don't want to hear at someone's funeral, you know what I mean? And one of the guys who gave a eulogy was a guy named John Royal, who was known to be a huge drug dealer, and I think he was wanted during the time of the funeral. So that prompted people to feel even more uneasy about them being there, and that made rumors just start flying around about what kind of trouble Gino was into, and did something happen that caused for him to die, because they could not figure out what exactly it was that killed him. So after the funeral, there was even more rumors and questions left unanswered. People had different theories about what happened. Andre the Giant was telling people that he had got shot, which was proven not to be true since there were no gunshot wounds. Gino's daughter even heard that he had taken weekly trips to other places in Texas where he was doing God knows what type of business. And then here's the best one, you guys, okay? People were accusing Chris Adams, yes, Chris Adams, his tag team partner, of killing him. Why? Because at that point of their career, they were no longer partners. They were feuding against each other, and I do believe that that was his last feud, which was against Chris Adams. Now, what happened was he blinded Chris, right, Gino, and the fans felt like, you know, he should get revenge or whatnot, and that's what the fans thought he did for revenge, actually killing Gino for blinding him. Obviously, you guys, that is not true. that's just the power of professional wrestling, where you're so into the storylines that somehow those storylines play out into real life to fans, and they can't differentiate between what's real and what's not. So that obviously did not happen as far as Chris Adams killing Gino, at least for storyline purposes. However, at that point, it got to the point, oh yeah, the police did even question Chris about it as well. Obviously people are talking, so they're gonna question him. But at that point, there was just kind of like nowhere else to go. And Gino's mom, poor lady, she just has so many questions, just want to know what happened to her son, and she was not getting anywhere with that. So she decided to find out on her own what was going on, even though she was really concerned about those gangsters and drug dealers that was at the funeral. She just had to know what happened to her son. So now Gino's mom felt like she had to do things on her own. She showed this suitcase that she had full of documents that she had to retrieve on her own, trying to investigate her son's death. Now, the autopsy was full of inconsistencies. The autopsy did state that there was a possible drug overdose, which probably is possible. However, it also described Gino as an obese, morbidly obese, Hispanic, uncircumcised male. And based on his wife and his mom, he definitely was circumcised. He's not Hispanic, and he definitely was not morbidly obese. So that prompted him to believe that maybe he faked his own death, because he did mention in the past about faking his death. The funeral was closed casket, so no one got to see Gino, and his mom doesn't even state if she saw him after he had died, like, you know, to identify if it was truly him. But she even also thought that he had faked his death. Now, towards the end of the episode, the producers reached out to John Royal, who was the drug dealer who gave a eulogy at the funeral. He had just finished serving 30 years in prison for drug trafficking, okay? And basically, I didn't think that he would want to participate, but he did decide that he wanted to answer some questions. And also another person who decided to be anonymous also answered some questions as well. Now, they were basically both said that Gino did participate in doing drugs and selling drugs, but none of them would admit to if that got him into any kind of trouble with other people, because previously he had been so paranoid about people trying to come get him. They mentioned that, you know, he was drinking a lot, and that he was doing a lot of heavy drugs. So those two things mixed together would play into him having hallucinations and delusions and things like that. So he wasn't actually seeing those types of things. Like, the way that they explained it, if you're stupid, you'll probably believe it. And this is no disrespect towards Gino's mom, but towards her listening to what they both said, she took it as if everything that they said was true and that she believed it. Like, she felt like what they said gave her closure. And I'm just going to say this, I really think that they were not telling the truth. They probably told some of the truth. Yes, he was involved with the drugs and the drinking and selling and stuff, but who becomes a drug dealer and do not have any type of issues with anyone at all? You know what I mean? You know, they were saying how Gino was a wrestler and he didn't get paid very, very well. So he was doing selling the drugs so that he can have more money, and basically to fund that type of lifestyle that he was portraying on TV as well. So now he's making all this money, definitely an amateur at selling drugs. He obviously, I'm gonna say, probably got into it with the wrong person. Did that have anything to do with his death? I don't know, but I don't think that he imagined people just trying to get to him to where somebody sitting in your back seat of your car. I don't think he would have imagined that. I do think he probably got into some type of trouble. Now, what would these two guys telling how things happen, how do they benefit by telling the truth? They wouldn't. if they were to say, yeah, he got into so and so with so and so, they wouldn't open their mouth to say that. Dude just served fucking 30 years. The other dude, we don't even know who he is. They would not come on telling the truth. They will come on saying what they felt was okay for Gino's mom to hear, to feel like she got closure, because she said she wasted the last 30 so years living in fear because she thought that somebody had killed her son and would ultimately come after her and her family. And I do feel really, really bad that she had to live like that. But I don't think she should have just taken their word for what they said. These are drug dealers. They obviously lie. They obviously do things that they're not supposed to do. So I don't believe whatsoever what they said about them not, that Gino did not get into any trouble with anyone at all. I don't think that that was true. And you know, if I was the mom, maybe I probably would have let it go, that I probably would never find out exactly what would happen, but I would not have believed what these two had said. So at this point in 2022, it's hard to say what exactly happened to Gino. Now, one thing that they did mention, the medical examiner did state that Gino had 5 times the limit that someone can have of cocaine in their system, and he said he'd never seen anything like that and didn't even think that it would be possible for someone to consume that much of cocaine. So could it have been possible? Yes. However, there was a lot of indications that maybe foul play was involved. Now, there was another rumor that David Manning did state that the referee who found his body had removed a huge ass cereal bowl filled with cocaine and dumped the cocaine. I don't know if that's true, because then somebody would have been able to find a little bit of cocaine of something in that house, and there was no indication of drugs in the house at all. So I'm not really sure if that was true or not. However, I do hope his family did get some type of closure with doing this episode. Now, the next episode I'm going to review is about the fabulous Moolah, and this is a very interesting episode because so many people have wonderful things to say about her while other people don't. Thank you for watching my review, you guys. Bye.